everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hey Pastor, have you seen this? My name is Rick Thiessen. I am the senior pastor of Allen Creek Community Church, and this is where we just kind of look at some content that you've sent in to us, or our internet media team has sent in to us for commentary. So we're just kind of getting a pastor's take on something that's making the rounds on the internet. So I haven't seen this. I'm totally approaching this cold. So this is also kind of our way, our media team getting back at the pastoral staff. So that's pretty cool. And if you want to send something in that would, maybe catch us off guard or stump us or whatever, get some commentary, send it to social@ac3.org, and we'll be more than happy to get some sort of pastoral Christian take on stuff that's making the rounds. So without further ado, this is the next thing I'm going to get comment on.
So I read a Bible verse today that really confused me. What's up? In Luke 16, Jesus tells the story of a rich man and a poor beggar named Lazarus. What confused me is when Jesus said that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried, and being in torments in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. 2 Corinthians 5 and Philippians 1 both say that a Christian's soul goes to be with God in heaven when they die. So how come Lazarus' soul went to a place called Abraham's bosom that was right next to the place of torment that the rich man's soul went to? It appears that before Jesus...
So it looks like he's going to give an answer to the question. So I'm going to comment on his answer, but just so that we get my perspective first on the issue of the placement of Hades and Abraham's bosom. There's no need, I think, to infer that they're right next to each other. Yes, there appears to be conversation that's going back and forth, but I don't think that this is another parable that Jesus tells, so it's a non-historical telling that gives us some sort of insight into the afterlife, but I don't necessarily think that we have to derive from this the temperature of what's going on in the afterlife or the decor. The idea that it's Abraham's bosom and not the presence of God is not really a conflict, because Abraham is assumed by all New Testament authors to be in the abode of God. And keep in mind that this is a temporary state, which also explains why the reference to the place of torment is Hades and not the lake of fire or whatever. This is a different state than the final state after final judgment, and we'll see if he gets into it.
Jesus was crucified, everyone's soul, whether saved or unsaved, went to a spiritual realm that overlaps with the center of earth. The Old Testament calls this realm Sheol, and based on Luke 16, it was divided into two compartments, one of paradise, known as Abraham's bosom, and one of torment. This is why saints in the Old Testament are described as going down when they die. Really? Yeah. When Jacob thought his son Joseph had died, he said that he will go down to Sheol, mourning his son. And when King Saul summoned the soul of Samuel from the dead, Samuel's soul is described as coming up from the earth. So what changed at the crucifixion? 1 Peter 3:19 says that when Jesus was dead for 3 days...
Okay, I know where he's going with the answer to this, but just first an affirmation of the general idea that the Old Testament saints' belief in the shadowy world of the dead, which is Sheol, was basically the destination for everybody, and that this represented a temporary state. And so that's very true, and something that's not really well understood, even in the Christian church, that there is the temporary state after we die. Now, I think he's going to make a comment that something radical changed when Jesus went to the grave.
He went and preached to the spirits in prison, which most likely means that he declared his victory over sin and death to both compartments of Sheol. And when talking about Jesus, Ephesians 4:8 says, when he ascended on high, he led captive the captives, and he gave gifts to people. The captives here are likely the Old Testament saints who died before Jesus paid the price for our sin on the cross. So
this is I like the way he's framing it. I think he understands that this is not the only way to interpret those verses. So he says likely, and I think that that's good to hold that tentatively, because I think there's a good case to be made that the descent of Jesus and the spirits that are in prison were commonly believed in first century Judaism to be the spirits that were imprisoned at the flood. So at the flood, there's the judgment against Nephilim, and these were commonly, at least in Jewish circles, to be what the flood judgment was about, and that they were killed in the flood, but then their spirits were judged and imprisoned. And so this is what's taught in the book of Enoch, an extra biblical book, but it had high degree of respect in the Jewish community, and the Jewish writers, including Peter, refer to it. So that is what a lot of people assume Peter is referring to. So so he imagines that Sheol has two compartments, the bosom of Abraham and the place of torment, Hades, and that Jesus' death and resurrection has a fundamental kind of cataclysmic thunderclap change that goes on in Sheol, where those spirits that were held in grace, which would have been in the bosom of Abraham, are liberated into the place of life in the presence of the Lord.
Even though Old Testament believers were saved by believing in the future atonement of Christ, it appears that God chose to store their souls in a place of paradise in Sheol until Jesus actually completed his atoning sacrifice. So when Jesus ascended to heaven, he emptied Abraham's bosom.
So that's a possible interpretation. The other way to look at it is simply that intermediate state did not fundamentally change pre or post Christ. It simply is that the work of Christ is what created the place of grace, where those who died in faith, like Abraham, could be in the presence of God, and all of them awaiting future fulfillment at the resurrection of Jesus.
But when Jesus told the thief on the cross that today he would be with him in paradise, they both went to Abraham's bosom in Sheol, and then Jesus took his soul up to heaven during his ascension? Exactly. And now that Jesus has completed his atoning work, every Christian who dies now goes to be directly in God's presence in heaven until the final resurrection.
Okay, and I don't have a large fundamental disagreement with that, other than I think it's disputable whether the resurrection of Jesus, that what he was doing, and I think was a pretty common view in the early church. What is he doing during the 3 days of his death? And the common view was that he descended into hell, and that he brought these souls that were in Sheol into a state of grace, or into the presence of God. So that's not an unlikely interpretation, but like I said, I think that Peter has probably some. He's hearkening to the Book of Enoch and to the captivity of these demonic souls, these sort of the Nephilim that are imprisoned, and just because that was referenced in the Book of Enoch, which he quotes extensively, or at least once. So I don't have a fundamental disagreement here. And I guess let me just say this, that I think what this video is helpfully drawing us to is a distinction between the intermediate state and the final state, and some of the confusion that we have about what's going on, like when Jesus says, today you'll be with me in paradise, or when he says in John chapter 14, in my Father's house are many rooms, that we sometimes think that's the final state. And it's very important that we understand that that's not the final state, that God is going to redeem all of creation. He's going to redeem our bodies. We're going to get new bodies, and creation itself is going to be redeemed at the end. So when we die, we do not go into, that's the end of the ball game. We go into an intermediate state. And some might say it's sort of like Randy Alcorn gives this illustration that the promise of heaven is like when we die and go to be with Jesus, is like when we get into an airplane and we say we're going to go to Palm Springs, and that's final heaven, but we have a stopping point, let's say in I don't know, some point in between there, that is awesome, but not as awesome as Palm Springs. Let's say a 5-star hotel in Houston. Houston. Uh, Houston is paradise, as we all know. So this is, I think, the appropriate analogy. Then we talk about when Jesus talks about today you'll be with me in paradise, in my Father's house are many rooms. He's talking about that 5-star resort in as a temporary stopping point before final resurrection. And I believe they get that right. As to the fate of Old Testament saints and where their souls exactly were is obviously a point of dispute. And I think this guy rightly frames it as a potential interpretation. So here we go. That's my take on this video. If you got another one, send it in to social@AC3. Until next time on Hey Pastor, have you seen this?